So I was charged with a pretty serious crime yesterday. So it's a little disturbing. I'm a little distraught today. It all started with the move of the solar panels. As you know, recently I moved the solar panels up here 10 whole feet, so I could get more morning time sun. The idea is the solar panels stay cooler in the morning, and so if I can capture that sun in the morning, the solar panels will be more efficient. By the time the sun was hitting the solar panels down there about 11 a.m. in the summertime, it can be 80, 90 degrees, probably 90 degrees. But at 9:30 when the sun hits it here, the temperature's still probably in the 70s. As I've said in previous videos, the solar panels become inefficient over 78 degrees. So every degree Celsius over 78 degrees Fahrenheit, they start to lose efficiency. It's like 2% for every degree Celsius, so it's pretty significant. You start to lose voltage. Now, when you're talking about solar panels, it's volts times amps. I have my solar panels hooked up to a 12 volt system, so 12 volt batteries, 12 volt inverter, 12 volt charge controller, but they actually produce about 20 volts. So when you buy them, you're going to get 20 volts out of them. And that's not a 24 volt, because a 24 volt would probably be like 30 volts. So 20 volts to produce 12 volts. They produce about 5 amps each, so when you multiply 20 times 5, that's 100 watts. That's how watts are figured out. Volts times amps equals watts. And if you just repeat that to yourself, you might be able to figure that out. And a lot of people struggle with that. I remember the first time I caught on to it. I'd been working with solar panels and trying to figure all this out, and I bought myself a kilowatt meter. Plug these things in the wall. They're about this big, maybe that wide. Plug it in the wall and you can plug your items into it, your appliances. And it would tell you how many watts it was running, how many amps it was running. Of course, it told you how many volts. Your house is 110, 120 volts, whatever it is. So 120 volts times 1 amp is 120 watts. 2 amps be 240 watts. I didn't understand that at the time, but I had this kilowatt meter, so it was easy for me to figure out what everything was, and I knew how many solar panels I needed, and I could guesstimate how many batteries I needed. Batteries are a little bit more complicated, and I'll get into that in a minute. I went up to my ex-wife's, she was my wife at the time, grandparents' house, and we were talking about electricity, and he just whizzed it out real fast. I didn't even hardly hear it. He said, volts times amps equals watts. And when I realized what he said, my life just cleaned right up. I mean, I understood everything a lot easier. And ever since then, I've been pretty efficient with solar panels and batteries and converting or inverting DC into AC. Now, moving these up here, I've kind of gotten a renewed interest in the solar panels. As you know, Carolyn's son has staying with us on the property. He's got a camper. And we're trying to figure out how to give him some modern conveniences, even though we live off grid. So as you know, we had an air conditioner in this old truck camper here. Moving into the property, we were building a tiny house and we were staying in this little truck camper, and it was sitting out here in the sun, and it gets boiling hot in that little camper. So we put an air conditioner in there. Well, at the time, we were having a lot of troubles, and I only had, you know, I say 6 batteries, but I'm not even sure I had that many. It may have been only 3 batteries. I didn't have a lot of batteries, let's put it that way, when we first got the solar panels hooked up. Well, now I've got 8 batteries, and it's just so much easier with having the correct number of batteries. On a sunny day like this, we can run his air conditioner absolutely no problem. We can even run it on a partly cloudy day. The problem is the batteries will discharge throughout the day, depending on how cloudy it is, and we need enough batteries to get the refrigerator, to get the freezer through the night. When there's no sun, you rely totally on batteries. That being said, on a partly cloudy day and he's got to run the air conditioner, we can run the generator also any time of the day, and he's been paying for the generator usage when it comes to the air conditioner because he realizes that he's got to, you know, that's his energy that he's using. So we're trying to give him the conveniences that he would be accustomed to. But since then, we've also learned how to run the well, which is just absolutely incredible. I mean, this has just changed everything for us here. The well pump was 800 watts. And like I said, in the past, we had like 3 batteries. So when I first started trying to run the well pump off the solar panels, it was pretty complicated. You only get to run it for a few minutes, and then you'd have to let the batteries charge back up. Well, now we got the 8 batteries, and we got this up here. By 11 o'clock, I can run the well. So that means the batteries are charged from the previous night, running the freezer. So from 9:30 to 11, the batteries become charged. Then I run the well. And I only got to run the well for 15 minutes to fill the IBC tank, fill Carolyn's sinks. But what I got to do is I got to make sure I do it every day. When I was running the well off the generator, I would run the well pump maybe every other day, just whenever it needed it. But even if it doesn't feel like it needed it, like 5 gallons, I go ahead and run the well, just so if tomorrow it's cloudy, we still got enough water, or I just don't have to run the well pump that long. That's the whole key. And that confuses a lot of people. Running times versus watts. And so now we're saving a ton of money on the generator. The generator cost was about 10 gallons of gas every month and a half, something like that. And then of course I was running the well off the other generator, and I was probably running a tank of propane, a 20-pound tank, every 2 months. So we were talking $70 a month. Now, that's through the winter. I will admit, that's through the winter. That's how much gas we have to use in the winter, because you got to realize charging time in the winter is much less. You got 2 things going on. 1, the days are just shorter. And 2, the sun is much further away from us. It's further south, below the equator. So you're not getting that crisp sunlight like you do in the summertime. But now we're up here. I mean, everything's changed. I'm pretty excited about this coming winter and how much electricity we're going to generate. Now in the winter, we don't have all these leaves on the trees either. So we start getting sunlight a little bit earlier in the morning than we do in the summertime. So let's call that 9 o'clock in the morning that we start getting sunlight. Now the other problem here in Missouri is in the wintertime, there are much more cloudy days. But I will say that a lot of people struggle with the concept of electricity, like the volts times amps equals watts. So if you have an appliance and you want to know if you can run it on solar panels, all you got to do is look at the back tag. Somewhere on the appliance, it's going to have a tag on it that tells you the electrical usage. Sometimes it has like the UL rating, Underwriter's Laboratory rating. And so in there, it's going to show you the amps. Somehow or another, it's going to show you the amps. I would imagine most appliances I've ever seen has the amps on it. And then all you got to know is what's going into your house. Usually 110, 120. So like I said, if you know that your house is 110 and your amps are 6, then you know that it's 660 watts. Now you can also Google a lot of things. It'll kind of tell you round numbers what it would be. Like the air conditioner, I Googled what a 5,000 BTU air conditioner was, and Google says about 450, but when I actually hook it up to the system, it's more like 550. So Google gives you a rough estimate on what your wattage can be. So even if you don't have the appliance in front of you and you want to go buy an appliance, you want to know if you can run it, you can Google it. Another thing I wasn't sure how much electricity it was using was my well pump. I knew it was 3/4 horsepower. And so all I had to do was Google it, and I know that 3/4 horsepower is roughly 800 watts, because I didn't look at the tag when I put it down in the water. I'm not even sure it had a tag on it. Or you can get this kilowatt meter that I was telling you about. And I don't even think they're that expensive. I've considered getting another one. I just don't need to anymore, so it's not a pressing issue. So as I've stated in the past, and I've showed diagrams, I've laid all the parts out on the ground before, and what you need in order to have a solar panel system like I have is solar panels. These are called Rich, R-I-C-H, solar. And you can get them off Amazon for about $80 a piece. I just looked how much they are a couple days ago. It's, I think, sometimes cheaper. They have, like, you can buy an individual panel, or then you click over and it's say 2 or 4 or 6 panels or whatever. Sometimes when you go over to those others, it's a little bit cheaper. Obviously the price is higher, because instead of $80 for one panel, let's say it's $150. So you got a $10 savings on 2 panels if you click over to that 2 panel page. Now, Rich Solar, they're fantastic. They are the best at efficiencies. I was telling you about that heat and how the heat will draw efficiencies out of the solar panels. There's been a lot of studies done on Rich Solar, and Rich Solar tends to be better at efficiencies during hot weather. As far as quality of the product, their wires in the back seem to have an issue. and I just rewired all mine. What happens is, as the temperatures change throughout the seasons, the connections, I guess, spread apart and tighten and spread apart, and over time they just become loose. And you can just pull the wires out after a while just by barely pulling on them. So like I said, I rewired all mine, and ever since then I've not really had a big issue. Well, I said I rewired all mine. I rewired most of mine. Just the other day when I was moving these up here, I found another one that had a loose wire on it. So again, I just replaced the wire. Now, this goes into what's called a charge controller. And a charge controller is like a car battery charger, except it's using the raw energy from solar panels, and it does stuff with it. It determines what your batteries need. It determines what you're running. It makes a lot of decisions. It's actually called an artificial intelligence computer. And so it's constantly changing the parameters of volts and amps and watts and what it's doing. And the thing is, it's actually kind of interesting is that I've noticed that the charge controller can tell the difference between a heavy load like a well pump and charging batteries. It knows the difference, and it's careful not to overcharge batteries. And so the solar panels go into a charge controller, and so that's a negative and a positive, red and black. And then your charge controller goes to your batteries, and again, that's red and black, negative and positive. And then you have an inverter, and so you have these 4 components: solar, charge controller, battery. You can get your lead acid battery from Walmart. Now, you go to the battery section, you look for the very biggest battery, and it'll say RV marine battery or marine RV battery, something like that. You get that one, it's $100. And like I said, I have 8 of them. I will admit that my batteries are not as efficient as they used to be, because over the winter time, I've put a tremendous strain on them, and I got them below the 50% range. And so they're not as good as they used to be, but they are doing just fine for what we need. And if I needed more, I'd just go ahead and get another battery. So then your inverter changes DC electric, so your battery electric, into AC electric, and that sends the electric to your house. So now you can have a regular 3-prong plug-in into your house. This is DC, 12 volt DC. Your batteries are 12 volt DC. Your inverter is 12 volt DC, inverts it to 120 or 110 volts to your house. Now, one of the questions I got in the comment section was, I have a 700 square foot house. How many solar panels do you recommend? Well, that has nothing to do with anything. It depends on what you want to run. As I said, you need to go through your house and you need to figure out what appliances you have and how many watts each appliance is producing. Now, there's 2 ways to do that. You can look at the back of the tag, figure out how many amps it is. And if it's 1 amp, then you got 110 volts coming in from your inverter times that 1 amp. So it means that's 110 watts. Carolyn and I only have that freezer, a tablet that I do YouTube videos on, 2 cell phones, and a couple fans. That's all we run. And so our wattage is very low. Now, what's interesting about a refrigerator, something you want to consider, is it uses 140 watts per hour. Now, you got to remember, though, that your freezer doesn't run a full hour. It runs 15 minutes. So all you got to do then, when you want to know how many watts it's using in an actual hour, you know, throughout the day, how many watts it's using throughout the day, you just divide it. So now you're only running a quarter of the time. So instead of saying 24 hours a day, it's more like 6 hours a day, if my math is right. So it'd be 140 times 6, it'd be 600 and whatever that is, watts per day, 700 watts per day. That way you can figure out how many batteries you need, because your batteries, my batteries are, well, they're only 50 usable amps in a battery. So I need 600 amps. So it tells you how many batteries you're going to need to run that throughout the day and night. Now, of course, nighttime is the only time the freezer really needs batteries, because during the day it's running on solar. So this isn't just how big my house is. Now, if I had the air conditioner like Carolyn's son, then I got to add in a 550 watts. But remember, I don't need to use that on batteries, because he's only running that through the day. So that is totally off solar panels. So the solar panels had to have enough energy to run his air conditioner and charge the batteries. Of course, on a cloudy day, you're not going to get 1,000 watts, because I have 1,000 watts of solar. And so you just got to monitor it at that point. And sometimes, like, you just have to wing it. You start out with 3 batteries like we did, and eventually you grow into 8. And then it's a surprise, hey, I can run things I used to not be able to. But I will say that I was accused of something that was, I feel like, pretty heinous. I was told that not everybody can grasp this kind of information. We're not all as smart as you. And so you need to stop talking about all this stuff and talk about living off grid. This is off grid. If you want to live off grid, then either you're not going to have electric at all, or you're going to have to figure out how to run solar panels. I think people just make too big of a deal out of electricity. It's just not that complicated. This is all DIY. And you're not going to electrocute yourself with 12 volts. Unless you're standing in the water, you're not going to electrocute yourself. I would say just go get yourself a 1 panel, $80. Get yourself a charge controller, $100. Battery, $100. Inverter, $100. So what are we up to? $400? And play with it. I know I have a subscriber that did it, but no, I'm not smarter than you. I've just taken a long time to research this stuff and learn how to use it. And anybody can do this. I am confident that anybody can do this if they want to do it. What I think the issue is you want to do it, you want to live off grid, but you don't want to have to burden yourself with learning this stuff. But trust me, it is a lot of fun. At least it is for me. So, if you click this up next box, it'll take you to a video where I was told you that Carolyn can't live here after 30 more days. So I hope I can inspire you to get over your fears of electric so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.